What's good? It's Woog. We have David Benavidez, 27 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBC interim super middleweight title status against Demetrius Andrade, 32 wins and 0 losses. By the way, did you know that out of Demetrius Andrade's 32 wins, 19 came via knockout? That kind of runs counter to the narrative and the reputation, right? But Benavidez and Andrade is about to go down. And this is a very important fight because I feel like, well, one, to clear up the place that Demetrius Andrade occupies on the boxing landscape, a longtime undefeated fighter, a 2-division champion who has yet to fight either a current or former champion. So again, 32 wins, 0 losses, 2-division champion, but has not fought any signature fights against signature opponents to date. So this at least solves that. But this Benavidez versus Andrade matchup also feels like it's the first domino to fall to clear up a lot of the logjam in boxing across several divisions. What I mean by that is there are a lot of top fighters who are waiting for the result of this fight to know what their next steps are going to be. Those fighters include Canelo Alvarez. Like, I'm sure he's got eyes on this one. Most people want to see Canelo fight David Benavidez. We've wanted that for like the last couple years now, pretty much ever since Canelo cleaned up the rest of the 168-pound division when he went on his rampage and beat Callum Smith, stopped Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. Well, Benavidez, you know, he is a 2-time WBC 168-pound champion, never lost his title in a fight. He lost it due to recreational drugs, and he lost it on the scale before his title defense against Romer Alexis Angulo. So timing wise, Canelo was collecting those belts when David Benavidez was no longer a WBC champion. They just put that WBC belt up for grabs in a WBA title defense for Callum Smith against Canelo. So in beating Callum Smith, Canelo was able to earn the WBA and the WBC super middleweight title. But I'm sure that Canelo's got eyes on this fight, so he can determine whether he's going to fight David Benavidez, or if Demetrius Andrade pulls off the upset, maybe he fights Andrade, even though he hasn't shown any willingness or wanting to fight Demetrius Andrade, or if he's going to instead fight Dimitri Bivol, even though, well, Bivol's going to be fighting in December on that Saudi Arabia card. So that would also line up time-wise. And then Bivol could either fight maybe Canelo in May, or hopefully against Artur Beterbiev sometime around May or after Ramadan or something like that. Or Canelo can fight Terrence Crawford after Terrence Crawford fights a rematch against Errol Spence Jr. So this fight has ramifications in what Canelo does next, which means that Dimitri Bivol's next fight after this upcoming fight against Lyndon Arthur is also going to be impacted by Benavidez versus Andrade. And also, since Canelo's next steps could be influenced by this fight, it also means that Terrence Crawford's next fight after Errol Spence is also going to be impacted by this fight, which means that Jermell Charlo's next steps could be impacted by this fight. He's currently got an IBF mandatory that he might or that he might not take. So he might be down to just the WBA and WBC 154-pound titles, which would make a Terrence Crawford versus Jermell Charlo fight less exciting because Jermell Charlo was already stripped of the WBO belt, which is currently occupied by Tim Tszyu. So Jermell Charlo is impacted by this fight, as is Tim Tszyu, because that's another potential opponent for either Jermell Charlo or Terrence Crawford, who again are both impacted by Canelo, who's impacted by David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade. So there are all kinds of ramifications, and a lot of steps will be kind of paved and figured out based on how Benavidez versus Andrade goes. But let's look at David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade. This is a very exciting fight. This is one of the 2 final Showtime boxing cards with a very good undercard, which we're going to get into in subsequent videos. But Benavidez versus Andrade, look, Benavidez is a substantial favorite. He's like a minus 350 in some books. Demetrius Andrade is like a plus 300, 3-1 underdog. So there's a clear favorite here. But I feel like this fight, it comes down to something that's, I look at as being kind of simple. I think that it comes down to, well, there's one complication to that simplicity, and that is Demetrius Andrade's age. At 35, what his legs will be like in the second half of the fight. But with a mover like Demetrius Andrade and somebody who's reliant on the sharpness, on the reflexes, on the defense, and on basically hitting you and getting hit much less by you. When somebody takes on that style and they are fighting a high volume or pressure style fighter like David Benavidez, who isn't just a brute who's coming forward just winging a bunch of punches, he does have more skill than advertised, and I've long thought that he's got better defense than advertised. Like if you look at his fight against David Lemieux, yes, David Lemieux was just in way over his head. David Lemieux was a former middleweight, really didn't have any business at 168, and he was an older fighter, but David Lemieux was barely able to lay a glove on David Benavidez. So he's got better defense than advertised, and he actually controls range in a manner that is better than advertised. But David Benavidez throws a lot of punches, and he's putting the pressure on you. Even when he's not throwing, he's always in a position where it looks like at any moment he could let 1, 2, or 4 to 5 punches go. He could break you off with fast, accurate combinations. He's got good power, not put you to sleep with one punch type power, but he's got good power, but his volume and his style just accentuate the power to where it starts to feel like there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Like you got that feeling in the Caleb Plant fight where Caleb Plant was reduced to holding for the majority of rounds 8 through 12. There was a ton of holding that allowed Caleb Plant to survive the 12-round distance against David Benavidez. But also when you saw David Benavidez kind of steamrolling Kyron Davis, Ronald Ellis, pretty decent fighters, but at a point it's just like you just seems like their backs are against the ropes and there's nothing they could do to keep this, 6'2", even though he looks more 6'3", especially if you look at him standing next to other 6'2" guys, David Benavidez. And I was wondering what the face-off was going to look like between Benavidez and Andrade. Benavidez is a clear 1 to 2 inches taller than Andrade, so factor that if you are wondering what the height and reach dynamic is going to seem like in this fight. But when you've got a pressure guy versus a mover, there comes a time in the fight where the mover is going to have to stand his ground. Like if you look at like when Guillermo Rigondeaux was in his prime, not like in his recent fights against like John Riel Casimero, where he's just doing a bunch of avoiding and not a lot of engaging. Like if you look at Guillermo Rigondeaux against Nonito Donaire, that was a big showdown at the time. Guillermo Rigondeaux, yes, was elusive, yes, was a mover, yes, was a sweet scientist, but he also stopped moving and started to stand his ground to where his feet weren't moving as much, and he was able to stay in position and to even start backing Nonito Donaire up a bit. Same thing with, and the recent fight that I'll draw, the parallel that I'll draw was when Rashidi Ellis fought Roman Villa versus when Bout Ennis fought Roman Villa. Rashidi Ellis wasn't able to ultimately stand his ground. Yes, he did win several rounds. Yes, he did box very well, but he started to get backed up and worked into the corner and started to get beat on because no matter how good of a mover you are, your legs and your sharpness are going to fade. Like you're going to start getting tired into the middle and later rounds. You won't be as difficult to find, difficult to hit. You won't be as fleet of foot. Your reflexes start to diminish to where you start getting a little bit sloppier with your sweet science aspects to your game. So Rashidi Ellis ended up losing that fight against Roman Villa. Bout Ennis was, he was moving a bit in the early rounds, but he was able to eventually stand his ground and start knocking Roman Villa back, pushing him back and putting a beating on him. I feel like it's incumbent on the mover to do something to where they don't have to move as much because you simply will not be as good at doing that. And the pressure guy is going to start catching up with you. Adrian Broner had difficulty standing his ground against Marcos Maidana, but he tried to, and that's what kept the fight close. After he got dropped early, Adrian Broner was able to fortify himself. But against Mikey Garcia, he couldn't do anything to start backing Mikey Garcia up. He wanted no parts of those exchanges. So Adrian Broner just moved and tried to get out of the way, try to avoid engaging for like the entirety of the fight. To be honest with you, I didn't think that Shakur Stevenson truly stood his ground in that recent fight against Edwin De Los Santos. Granted, De Los Santos should have sold out more to make that more of a fight, but Shakur Stevenson was only fighting the negative style without fortifying his position and then pushing you back. Shakur Stevenson didn't do enough of that against De Los Santos, even though he did come out with the win. But like, for all the running that people say Floyd Mayweather did, if you look at Floyd's fights, he was often like against Ricky Hatton after the first like couple of rounds, he ends up standing his ground and walking you down. He did it against Sugar Shane Mosley after getting blasted in that second round. He started to walk Shane Mosley down. That became a thing with Floyd. Like, yes, he might do some moving in certain pockets of the fight, but he's often also getting more flat-footed and then taking a step forward and just staying in his defensive construct, taking another step forward, walking you down with the jab. I just wonder, and this is assuming that Demetrius Andrade wins the majority of the first few rounds. Like, look, if David Benavidez is up like 3 rounds to 1 after 4, or, 3 rounds to 2 after 5, that's already bad news for Demetrius Andrade. I'm going into this fight under the assumption that Demetrius Andrade could at least win like the first 2 out of 3 rounds, maybe the first 4 out of 6 rounds or 3 out of 5 rounds, something like that, to where David Benavidez is going to have to start taking over in the middle and late rounds to either win on the scorecards or stop Demetrius Andrade. I expect Andrade to have his best success like he does in a lot of his fights, like against Liam Williams. Look at how he looked against Liam Williams in the first half of the fight versus in the last few rounds. I think that Demetrius Andrade is going to have his best success in the first 5 rounds against David Benavidez. And if he doesn't have success in the first few rounds, there's almost no chance of Demetrius Andrade winning. That's how I see it. Now, let's say that he does have that early round success, which is going to be interesting seeing them, exchange jabs, because Demetrius Andrade has good hand speed, but this is only his second fight at 168. Damon Nicholson was his only opponent, and Damon Nicholson has been stopped since that Demetrius Andrade fight. So I don't even know where Damon Nicholson is. Yes, he is the first guy to take Edgar Berlanga the distance, but he also just got stopped by Christian Mbili. So, again, Demetrius Andrade won by several rounds against Nicholson, but that is his only fight at 168. And even that was a 10-rounder. This fight against David Benavidez is obviously a 12-rounder. The last 12-rounder that Demetrius Andrade fought where it went the full 12 was against Liam Williams. And Liam Williams did have his moments later on in that fight. He made some good contact where it looked like he kind of shook up Andrade a couple times where it's like, damn, are we okay? So that's why it is ultra important that Andrade gets off to a good start here. It's going to be interesting to compare their hand speed once the fight starts. Like, is there going to be a noticeable hand speed advantage for Demetrius Andrade, or is it going to look close? If those first couple rounds are looking like really close and David Benavidez looks like in the early rounds he's able to box nearly evenly with Demetrius Andrade at range, again, that's bad news for Demetrius Andrade. So let's say Demetrius Andrade wins the first 3 out of 5 rounds. The question is, at what point does the tide start to turn? Because I do expect it to turn. You've got the much younger David Benavidez, who kind of has like a snowballing of activity where it seems like he starts picking up the pace as the rounds go on, and he starts just breaking you off with more and more combinations in more and more exchanges, starts to pick up the aggression. So at what point in this fight is Demetrius Andrade's back gonna start touching the ropes? Because you would think that the more Andrade is able to keep this fight near the center of the ring, the better it is. So when you take the step back, do you start pivoting and turning and keeping it near the center of the ring and off the ropes? Or do you take that extra step back and now you're on the ropes, and now, you've only got limited paths of escape, and now David Benavidez could find you much easier? At what point is Andrade's 35-year-old legs gonna start failing him to where he starts spending more time on the ropes. The amount of rounds that Andrade is gonna be able to bank out of the first 6 to 8 rounds is gonna be to the degree that he can potentially earn a decision win on the scorecards. Like, if he's able to win the first, let's say 6 out of 9 rounds, and then win 1 of the last 3 rounds, and he doesn't hit the canvas, that's a decision win for Demetrius Andrade. If he's able to win like 4 out of the first 5 rounds, and then just 3 more rounds anywhere out of the last 7 rounds, that's a decision win for Demetrius Andrade. So he's got a shot at edging a decision here. Like, even if he starts fading in the late rounds, it's important that he doesn't get knocked down, because that just makes things a lot easier for David Benavidez, because not only do you not win that round, but it's a 10-8 round. It's just how the math works. So if he's able to stay off the canvas, win the lion's share of the first half of the fight, and still be formidable to where you could steal a round or 2 in the latter half of the fight, he can edge a decision. But if he starts fading like Caleb Plant did after, what was it, the 4th or 5th round, to where David Benavidez won just about every round after that, then it's going to be a significant margin of victory for David Benavidez. And again, this is assuming that it goes the distance and that he doesn't stop Demetrius Andrade. I know that a lot of people think that Benavidez is going to stop Andrade. I'm going to give Andrade the benefit of the doubt as a craftsman, as a survivor, as an experienced fighter. Although, again, he hasn't fought anybody near the caliber of David Benavidez, whereas David Benavidez has been in there with Anthony Durrell and Caleb Plant. Benavidez has fought better fighters than Andrade, and I don't know if Andrade is the best guy David Benavidez has fought. I know David Benavidez is by far the best guy that Demetrius Andrade has fought. Andrade's best opponents have been Vanes Martirosyan, Willie Nelson, Sulechki. Although I know Demetrius Andrade had the most trouble, arguably, with Jack Kulke. He just hasn't fought, I mean, let alone A-. He's barely fought B level and B+ level fighters, barely. And especially lately, it's been a lot more Jason Quigley, Luke Keeler, C level fighters. But I will still give Demetrius Andrade, as a skilled fighter and an ultra competitor, I think that he's going to at least go the distance. I just wonder, at 35 years old, at a pace that he probably is not going to be comfortable with. I know Liam Williams is a pressure fighter, but the style of pressure that David Benavidez puts on you is as much a mental pressure as it is a physical pressure. So how much of Demetrius Andrade's southpaw nature, so his style, his rangy looping punches mixed with sharp, short, straight punches, how much is he going to be able to get David Benavidez's respect? Is David Benavidez going to be cautious in the early rounds? Is he going to be getting landed on cleanly by straight left hands and so forth, to where he starts getting reluctant, to where David Benavidez is able to feint and draw a reaction from Benavidez? If that's the case, then maybe Demetrius Andrade far exceeds expectations and is able to win by a couple of rounds if he's able to get David Benavidez's respect, and to get David Benavidez reluctant and tepid, timid, coming into the pocket and letting his hands go. I would be surprised if that happens. He's really going to have to tag Benavidez multiple times to draw that level of respect. But to me, again, it comes down to what round the tide starts changing. I do think that Demetrius Andrade is going to be able to win a round or 2 in the second half of the fight, unlike Caleb Plant. But I think that the first half of the fight is going to be competitive enough where David Benavidez is going to be able to win at least 2 of the first 6 rounds, maybe 3 of the first 6 rounds, to where if he wins like the last 4 of 6 rounds, David Benavidez wins the decision. I'm erring on the side of David Benavidez via decision, but I think that it's going to be a very competitive fight. I'm very curious to see what these first 4 rounds look like. Again, if it looks like it's a flat out outclassing for Demetrius Andrade, he's got a real shot at winning this one. But if it looks nearly even, in the first few rounds, it's going to be very tough for Demetrius Andrade to pull that off. And I do think that David Benavidez is going to box very evenly, very competitively, even in the first half of the fight. Like, I expect Demetrius Andrade to maybe win 4 out of the first 6 rounds. But I think that it's very likely that it looks more like a 3-3 fight after 6 rounds. And then I think that the age is going to start showing in the second half of the fight, and that Demetrius Andrade is going to start getting beat on a bit more. And, you know, the fight that I keep on coming back to is Jarrett Hurd against Erislandy Lara. When they had that title unification fight, it was super high stakes. We'd been wanting to see Jarrett Hurd fight an elite guy, and there he was against the boxer in Erislandy Lara. Lara was outclassing him. You could say that Lara was winning the majority of the early rounds, and it was looking like Lara might pull it off, but Lara's age started to show, and this is several years ago. That tells you how long Lara's been around. And he was kind of like a late pro, where he wasn't racking up like 40 professional fights in his 20s, you know what I mean? But Jarrett Hurd started to wear on Erislandy Lara and started to look like he was kind of rolling downhill by the last few rounds, to where it started looking like Lara was trying to move but wasn't able to move as much, started to get caught against the ropes a lot more, started to get forced into more long exchanges late in the fight, to where Jarrett Hurd started to take over towards the end of the fight, ended up dropping Erislandy Lara, I think like in the final round, and ended up winning a close decision over Lara. I think that this fight might have shades of Hurd versus Lara, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be totally shocked at a late stoppage, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Andrade's going to go the full 12. I wouldn't be surprised if it looks like Andrade is holding on to survive this one by the end of it, to where Andrade, who, you know, he's had big blotches of inactivity after that Jason Quigley fight, where Andrade scored an early knockout, like 2nd round knockout. He went 14 months between that and his fight against Damon Nicholson. So he hasn't been super active. So I feel like age starts to work against you even more when you are that inactive in different spots. But, you know, luckily for Demetrius Andrade, that fight against Damon Nicholson was only 9-10 months ago. So that fight wasn't too long ago, but it was a big dry spell before that, where Demetrius Andrade was battling a shoulder injury, I believe, that took him out of the Zach Parker fight, and he didn't end up, you know, defending that WBO middleweight title against Janibek. And it was just a question of, do you go up in weight? Do you stay put at middleweight? And it was just a lot of uncertainty in Demetrius Andrade's future. So I am happy for him in the sense that he's got a big time opponent finally in his career after years of frustrating fight by fight schedules. You know what I mean? But it's also one of those, be careful what you ask for, because this is not Jermall Charlo. This is not Jaime Munguia. This is not an aging Triple G, who Andrade had been trying to fight Triple G for years, for a long, long time. He'd been trying to fight a lot of these guys for a long, long time. I didn't get the impression that David Benavidez was the guy that Demetrius Andrade truly wanted to fight, but that's what we're left with here. That is who stepped up. That is who you're going to be fighting. And I look at this as being a much tougher fight for Andrade than if he was to have that showdown against Jermall Charlo, or that title defense against the mandatory Jaime Munguia, who wanted no parts of that title fight, shamefully in my view. But yeah, I'm going to go with David Benavidez. Is he going to get a late knockdown of Demetrius Andrade? You know, I'll say no, but I'll say that he's going to do enough. He's going to do enough to win a decision, something like 116, 112, 115, 113, give or take that one outlier scorecard that's going to have it either way this way or way this way outside of the other two scorecards. But I think that David Benavidez is going to win. Is it going to be a split decision? I think that Demetrius Andrade is going to fight valiantly. I think it's going to be like Andrade's last stand. I mean, because look, Demetrius Andrade is at a point where he's probably not a Hall of Famer. And if he beats Benavidez and ends up getting a shot against Canelo, and let's just say hypothetically, I know we're just speculating long-term now. Let's say he beats Benavidez, then beats Canelo. Well, at that point, you've got a strong claim to the Hall of Fame, especially after being a 2-division champ already. And then doing that, you are probably then a Hall of Famer. But I just think that unfortunately for Demetrius Andrade, he's finally having his moment. This is your time to shine. And I think that he's going to fall short via decision, though, against David Benavidez. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Thank you for riding with me. Look, I'm getting over a cold, and my voice has been the last thing to recover. So thank you. If you've gotten to this point, thank you for putting up with my shot voice at this point. But yeah, I'm taking David Benavidez via, I'll say close and competitive, but clear. I'll say unanimous decision win for David Benavidez. But let me know your thoughts on Benavidez versus Andrade. I'm glad that this fight is taking place, but I want to get your thoughts. And what do you think about the odds? I feel like that the odds are pretty appropriate given Andrade's age and given that he is still pretty new to the division. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.